Congressman, thanks for joining us. Let's start with Biden's agenda. Senator Joe Manchin said when it comes to the Build Back Better social safety net bill, Democrats are going to start from scratch. But here's what Speaker Pelosi said.
There are big chunks of the bill that have to be contained in the bill. But remember this, that this is a reconciliation bill. So when people say, let's divide it up, no, they don't understand the process. Call it a chunk if you want, but whatever you call it, we want it to be able to make a difference.
So what does the final bill look like? What can you support? What can the progressives in the House support that can also get 50 votes in the Senate, including Manchin and Sinema, plus, of course, Vice President Harris?
I think that there are a few provisions that I think are very important that I hear that even Senator Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema support. For instance, prescription drug price reform, universal pre-K, which, as you know, then Governor Manchin actually signed into law for West Virginia, and he's very strongly supportive of. And then, climate change provisions, which are essential if we're going to actually cut greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2050. So, perhaps it's not entirely BBB, but if we can get 1 or 2 Bs, I think that would be a success.
Manchin has signaled that he's willing to accept $500 billion in climate funding, universal pre-K, as you note, a permanent fix for the Affordable Care Act. He's also in favor of negotiating lower prescription drug prices. Would you accept a smaller package that just includes those items?
Absolutely. For instance, prescription drug price reform is something that's been talked about for years and years and years. My constituents are crying out for this particular reform. The price of insulin, which has not changed in terms of its formulation for decades, has skyrocketed in prices. And so to be able to tell people that you can finally afford your insulin and you don't have to ration it as you might be doing right now because it's so expensive would be a big win.
You're on the House Intelligence Committee. Today, the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, said that the country does not plan to invade Ukraine. From what intelligence you have looked at, do you believe him?
Do I believe him or my lion eyes? I think that the real key here is we have to make it very clear to the Russians exactly what the costs would be if they were to invade Ukraine. And to me, those costs are very high. There would be economic sanctions, and that would include, for instance, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline being targeted by big bipartisan majorities in Congress. This is the pipeline that the Russians want to build to transport energy to Europe. Secondly, we would definitely supply defensive equipment to the Ukrainians to protect themselves and ward off this invasion. So I strongly suggest that the Russians need to really carefully figure out what the costs are. And it's not just the president who would be in favor of sanctions or these measures. It would be huge bipartisan majorities in Congress.
CNN's Barbara Starr at the Pentagon reports that military leaders are looking at options if Russia invades, military options. Should the U.S. be willing to put boots on the ground in Ukraine?
No, and our constituents would not want that. It would not be prudent. However, we should help the Ukrainians defend themselves, and we should continue with our supply of armaments to them. Mm-hmm. But I would oppose any putting of our U.S. forces in Ukraine.
Finally, you maybe heard earlier in the broadcast, at least 70 people, including women and children, were killed, more than 130 injured in Yemen today when an airstrike hit a detention center. Yemen is blaming the Saudi-led coalition that the U.S. is part of still. How complicit is the United States, is the Biden administration in the continued slaughter of innocent individuals, innocent women and children in Yemen by Saudis?
I am concerned, and I'm glad that the president said yesterday that we were going to do more to try to end this conflict. But you have to remember that, for years now, we've been arming the Saudis. We've been providing them with support and intelligence in their bombing campaigns. we have helped to trigger this humanitarian catastrophe and this famine in Yemen. And so now we have to do what's right. We have to stop arming the Saudis. We have to prevent this catastrophe from growing. And we have to use our leverage to end the civil war.
Biden said he was going to do it. He hasn't done it. Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Have a